Good morning and welcome. This is a practice run for my talk entitled Women in Science and Engineering, A Tale of Two Countries, to be presented at the American Society for Engineering Education's annual conference. Session T359B focused on special topics, conscious considerations. The session will be held on Tuesday, July 27th, beginning at 11:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Rather than packing my short presentation with a lot of facts and figures, which you can read in my paper and discuss them with me offline if there's any interest, I will tell you about how I became interested in pursuing this topic and how I plan to delve further into it. This topic is a side interest of mine. Nearly all of my academic research is on computer hardware and architecture. From time to time, I've worked on education and outreach, but this is my first venture into engineering education conferences. The two countries of my tale are the US and Iran. The US and Iran are different in almost every respect imaginable. The US is bigger by a factor of about 6, richer, and technologically more advanced. The two countries are quite dissimilar in other respects: systems of government, regional stability, history, language, laws affecting women, which is quite important for this particular discussion, and school curricula. Yet they are similar in terms of outcomes for women in STEM. Things look different along the way, but the divergent roads lead to the same destination. In way of background, I started my academic career at UCLA in 1973, yes, almost 50 years ago. Finding my way back to my motherland, Iran, where I persevered until 1986, 7 years after the Islamic Revolution. I can write a book about my academic experiences in Iran, and this is indeed one of my retirement projects. Our initial post-revolutionary optimism for democracy and freedom faded very quickly. As an already established and somewhat respected academic, I could probably tolerate the new Islamic regime and live a fairly comfortable life up to retirement, despite overt discrimination and rampant mismanagement at the university and national levels. But for my toddler and newborn sons, the future looked bleak. My female students and colleagues were subjected to even harsher restrictions. It was the worst of times. As I left Iran in the mid-1980s and began to work in Eastern Canada, later joining UC Santa Barbara, I was pleased to learn that North American women had been making excellent progress in STEM fields, an issue dear to my heart given that I had 3 sisters, all professional women, a wife who was a software engineer, and later a daughter who pursued neuroscience and computer science. The path toward gender parity by the year 2000 seemed clear-cut, and I was excited to be a part of this progress, especially given that computer science appeared poised to get there first. As you see from the chart, extrapolation of the data available in those days indicated that computer science should be able to achieve parity, gender parity, by about 1990. This was quite exciting for me, and other disciplines weren't far behind. It was the best of times. Note that my interests are primarily in STEM fields. I have included medical and law schools for comparison purposes on this slide, and also because these disciplines compete with STEM in attracting motivated and capable women interested in lucrative, high-impact career paths. Unfortunately, the elation didn't last. The plummeting on women's participation in computer science in the late 1980s, this drop here, and again in the mid-2000s over here, was quite disheartening for me. I realized that working hard to recruit women to STEM fields without putting in place support structures needed to ensure learning, professional development, and graduation is inadequate. Equally important is having a receptive and accommodating job market. After completing my research for this paper based on sources that went to the mid-2010s, I have looked into more recent trends. This is ongoing work to gain more insight on subsequent changes and their underlying causes. It seems that both medicine and law have successfully counteracted their bogged down progress. Participation in physical sciences has stayed more or less flat. Computer science has stayed flat or declined a bit depending on which studies you believe. Here are some key observations from the paper. Let me begin at the very top, the top left table. Nobel Prizes. Women's share of Nobel Prizes in science averaged around 2.5%, with some fluctuation. The share rose in the last 2 decades, the first 2 decades of the 21st century, but it remains to be seen whether progress will be maintained in the current century. Nobel Prizes do not cover engineering, computer science, or mathematics. But in my paper, I report on membership in the U.S. National Academy of Engineering, ACM's Association for Computing Machinery's Turing Award, and Mathematics Fields Medal as substitute indicators. And they show similarly disappointing outcomes. Many U.S. universities have been successful in improving the gender ratio through a mix of recruitment and support mechanism. On the left, in the middle, you see the chart, gender mix for Carnegie Mellon University. In some fields, participation dwindles with degree level, meaning that in more advanced degrees like MS and PhD, there is lower participation. Also, participation differs by discipline. It's rather high in biology and biomedicine, and it is the lowest among the disciplines listed in the table on the lower left in computer and information science. Again, a big disappointment for me given my area of expertise. Now, that dwindling of gender mix with degree level is also observed among the faculty ranks, going from assistant to associate to full professors. And also in corporate positions, The chart on the upper right shows the mix of various groups in different corporate positions, ranked from 1 to 6, where 1 is the lowest level positions and 6 is the highest level management position. You see from the chart that inclusion in corporate leadership positions declines for all but white men. And the decline is most noticeable for women of color. And the final part of this slide, the chart on the lower right, shows that Iranian women have maintained their participation in post-secondary education despite all the obstacles that the government puts in their way. There is a slight downturn beginning with 2012-2013, whose cause is as yet unknown to me. But generally speaking, given all the obstacles, this participation level is quite impressive. In this next table, given that direct objective comparisons between the two countries is rather difficult, I decided to share my insights into what ails each country in the domain of women in STEM, using subjective grades assigned based on personal experience. Actually, instead of roadblocks or barriers, I took a positive view by comparing what I call facilitation factors. So higher grades in this table are better. A 0 to 10 facilitation grade of G corresponds to a roadblock or barrier grade of 10 minus G. As seen in this table, strengths and weaknesses are different for the two countries, but the end result, a total score of just above 50%, or around 40 out of 80, is about the same. High school STEM preparation and free or low-cost access to higher education are the strongest elements for Iran, while family and labor laws are the strongest points for the US. So, what can we learn from Iran other than avoiding theocracy and not enacting anti-women laws? The women's rights movement in Iran is the strongest in the Islamic world. As much as some members of the ruling clergy would like to change the educational system to make it harder for women to choose certain majors, there seems to be no going back. The high cost of college education in the US is detrimental to women's participation. Alongside reducing costs, we must improve incentives and family support. Going forward, we need to improve our understanding of the roller coaster shape of participation curves, expand STEM preparations in K through 12 programs, and last but not least, assess how economic cycles and job market shifts affect women. The COVID-19 pandemic opened our eyes to the greater burden on women of economic and other social disruptions. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to questions and comments from those interested. I can be reached via email for quick inquiries and comments, and will be available to chat over Zoom for more substantive discussions. Thanks again, and stay well.